Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another edition of Stream Time Sports. I'm your host, Nick Meacham, CEO of Sports Pro. Now, for regular listeners, you'll know Chris is still on leave at the moment, but rest assured he'll be back on the show very, very soon. Now, we've been talking a lot on the podcast about topics like the state of the football and the media industry around it, the FIFA World Cup and its delivery and impact across the globe, and more wider around the business of building sports and media businesses, irrespective of if you're a sports property, a podcast company, or a bona fide media outlet. So I'm putting a little pressure on myself here, but this pod feels like it could be a really nice crescendo as we roll into the kickoff of the Premier League season this weekend with a wide-ranging conversation with one of the best in the business. My guest today runs one of the biggest independent football media organizations in North America and has been a pioneer and driving force around football's growth in the US since they first launched back in the early 2010s. And they really are a content machine now, which we're going to dig into a little bit, but have produced something like over 200 podcasts during the World Cup through the various channels that they have. And with that output, saw streams increase by over 500% over that time, which is a mind-boggling number. And it isn't just podcasts. They produce TV shows, newsletters, alternate broadcast, and live events. So most impressive of all of that is that our guest isn't even American. He is actually a proud Evertonian. So if you haven't worked it out yet, it's the one and only Roger Bennett, co-founder and CEO of the Men in Blazers Media Network. Welcome to the show, Roger.
It's lovely to be with you. I am actually American, though I am in Liverpool, my hometown right now. But I love that you've made Evertonian a national identity, because if it was, I'd get a passport.
Well, look, I've been listening to some of your stuff of late. I can feel that proudness of your Everton fandom coming through in all the content you're doing. So I thought I'd make a point of it. But look, I've been looking at your schedule and seeing what you've been up to of late, content-wise and otherwise. It seems like you've been quite on a hectic schedule in the UK of late.
Yeah, we've just finished about an hour ago. A League is Back week in which we've really traversed the United Kingdom from south to north. We've been here for a week. We've been in 5 cities. We've done 11 interviews. Tottenham, Chelsea, Arsenal, Liverpool, Manchester. I mean, going on and on and on. We've done a live show at the Hill Dickinson with beautiful, beautiful Everton Football Club and so many of their key players telling their story on the eve of the season. And we also managed to slip in, and it was a really fascinating and wonderful experience. Our first ever live broadcast, match broadcast on the Men in Blazers YouTube channel in partnership with Tottenham. We broadcast their weekend game, their preseason game against Hoffenheim to North America, which was an incredible moment for us. We learned so much, and it was really emphatic.
I definitely want to dig into that experience. We do a lot of coverage around the business of sports media, and that's always an interesting story when we start to see the spreading of distribution of the live match across different channels. But for those that aren't familiar Men in Blazers, Roger, just set a bit of the scene. You guys cover so many different aspects of football, obviously with the roots and the base in North America, but set the scene for us all for those that aren't familiar with the journey and who you are. Sure.
I mean, if you want to get a taste of what we do, I just go to our YouTube now, click on the Mikel Arteta interview, click on the Xabi Alonso interview, click on the Eberechi Eze interview. That's what we've dropped on the past 3 days. And I think ultimately, actions speak louder than words, and you'll get, in fact, we talked to Xabi Alonso about the phrase, show me, don't tell me. So go and click on those. You'll get a real sense of what we do. But we started back in 2010, I think, for the purposes of your storytelling. The project is based on 2 first mover advantages that we lent into. The first is we spotted the rise of a deep love of football in the United States. When I moved to America in 1994, driven by a love of Public Enemy, the Chicago Bears, John Hughes movies, everything I loved. I moved to Chicago. Everything I loved was there in this incredible, giddy, kind of chicken wing propelled, glorious Technicolor, everything apart from football, which was not to be found. I moved before the 94 Men's World Cup, and a study came out that showed that soccer, as they call it there, was America's 60th favorite sport, and tractor pulling was number 66. Crap you not. They didn't just not like it. They truly, truly hated it. And it's been the story of my lifetime, the rise of football in the United States. The Economist, right before the World Cup, revealed that football fandom was now the third biggest sport in the United States, behind the NFL, that juggernaut, and the NBA. It's a young fan base. It's deeply diverse. It's men's football, it's women's football. There's an enormous Hispanic second and third generation audience. And the second story is one of timing. When we started to broadcast and build community, essentially, we built piece by piece communities now, because it's not just around the Premier League and the US men's national team, which is really the original platform. We have a whole women's platform now, really fast growing. The women's game that covers women's football around the world. We have a Hispanic facing platform, Vamos, which is speaking to that young second and third generation, an enormous audience through their interests, their passion, their communities. So the second story that I'm sure we'll dig into is that we timed it just as this thing, the podcast, was born 2010, which allowed you to knit together for the first time a really emotionally connected, deeply involved, deeply invested with each other community, social media, making it a two-way conversation. And then podcasts, moving into YouTube, moving into digital, moving into, we cut everything we do by sea, land, by air, as we talk about it, on TikTok, on Instagram, kind of make sure, we have a television shows on a number of channels covering every kind of 24/7, 365 opportunity wherever a football is being kicked around the world by men or women. We want to be there. And that's been the story of our rise. It's taken a long time, but we are there. And the World Cup, as you said, 2026 was really the apogee.
So obviously you started, as you said, in 2010, big focus on really focusing around the North American marketplace, particularly from an audience development perspective. You're talking about football as a sport with a big focus on the Premier League, especially, as at the heart and center of all of that. How have you found that? How quickly, I guess, did you see the uptake on that content when you did launch? Was it a eureka moment from kind of day one, or did you have to grind it out in those first early stages to get momentum with it?
Look, I wrote a book about this that dropped before the World Cup. We Are the World Cup. 94, as I say, the World Cup was like a circus, still until this one, the best attended of all time. But it was like a circus that came and left. 95 was in Chicago, and we're in the FA Cup semi-final. 365 channels on my cable television. Not one was showing the biggest game in Britain live. And I had to ultimately phone my father in Liverpool and hold the phone against Radio City, the radio broadcast. And that was in the days when long distance calls were really, bank breaking. And so the story has been slow and steady. Really, 2006 was when I first noticed it. Before then, Setanta, that fantastic pioneering live broadcast channel, had broadcast one game on a Saturday, 7:30 in the morning. And it was largely expats, the crew gathering together in a DC bar where I lived, feasting on Luton Town against Sheffield Wednesday as if it was Boca River. And it was very hard to access what's happened. And the narrative is about the internet connecting Americans to happenings at Anfield from Alabama or to Leicester City from Los Angeles, as closely as if they live by the team stadia. Before that, we were getting sent in the mail press clippings from the Liverpool Echo to follow along. So the internet allowed fans access to information. Cable and then streaming has really accelerated it. You can now watch more live football in New York City than you can even in England. Every single Premier League game is accessible, but every game from around the world now, as the streaming wars have really been driven at the Arrowhead, the emotional communities of football. Everyone's willing to pay $9 on multiple platforms, or so it seems. And so those at EA Sports FIFA, the game, kind of connected sensitized a young audience. That's been an incredible driver in a serious way. The silent hand that's grown an understanding of the Star Wars cantina of players, teams, leagues for a whole young audience. The success of the women's team been a phenomenal story. Women's football, the US women's team, gave America what it cried out for, a team that wins. America loves winners. All of these things have come together to build a incredible audience. And then the Premier League starting to be broadcast by NBC, remarkably in 2013, has been game-changing. And Americans have been able to follow along with that telenovela, acted out live week on week in between World Cups. And that was really the missing link. So we spotted that young audience who were becoming deeply connected. And podcasts were really the missing connection. They allowed a community to form, emotionally connected to each other, as I said earlier. Twitter was just breaking through so they could engage with everything in a deeply kind of call and response UGC way. And so it happened quickly and slowly. The podcast was on ESPN to begin with. Bill Simmons then brought it onto Grantland, which gave it a platform, a muscle, a hilltop with which to really engage a sizable audience. And so we grew fast, but then, we do a lot of live shows culminating in the World Cup where, before games, we did the equivalent. We drove during the World Cup across America in a large Home Depot orange bus, city to city, doing these college game day style live broadcasts before games. Seattle, 5,000 people coming together, 8:30 in the morning, coffee in one hand, beer in another. Marshawn Lynch, the Seattle Seahawk, joining us on stage. And then we marched to the match, 15,000 fans behind us. So that took gigging, live show after live show after live show, reinforcing that deep connection. So I'd say it was quickly and then slowly grind. I laughed. I watched the Odyssey the day after the World Cup with my family when I came home, and I was like, Odysseus, like he just had to slay some giants. We just had to hang out on a Trojan horse for a couple of days. Watching football grow in the United States, it took even longer than 10 years, but we're there now and it feels glorious.
I've talked to the guys at NBC a lot, and they really do point out that the Premier League rights and the deal they did back then was hands down their best move that they've made in terms of the live sports space outside of some of the top tier stuff.
By the way, it wasn't just that they did it. It was the way they broadcast it. It was the first time football had been broadcast in a polished, intelligent, accessible. What they did was really nuanced, Nick, and it changed everything.
And it really opened my eyes when I went to New York. I think it was in probably something like 2010. I went with a colleague for an event out there, and he said he was an Arsenal fan. He's like, let's come with me to this bar. I'm like, it's 8 a.m. or 6 a.m. I think it was maybe 5 or 6 a.m. What do you mean go to a bar at 5 or 6 a.m? And we went in, and there's dozens and dozens and dozens of Arsenal fans all lined up around the TVs with their shirts on, and just it opened my eyes to what sport is like in the US, where it is from 6 a.m. through till right to the absolute long as you can keep your eyes open, particularly on the Saturday. It's quite extraordinary.
Nick, what you're saying is so, there's layers to that, by the way. One of the Premier League's success breakthrough realities was that it wasn't in prime time. MLS has been trying to break through in prime time for years. You're against the NBA. You're against the buzzsaw of the NFL. You will not break through in prime time. The genius part of it, it's inadvertent, of the Premier League is they're coming on at 7:30 in the morning, East Coast. There's no competition. And we always joke, part of the success is Americans love any excuse to daytime drink, and football nothing gives you that at the weekend. Like Premier League football. It is the joy of my weekend, getting, as soon as the football starts, being, hundreds of Americans sending us screenshots of their cell phones with the alarm. And the alarm will always say, work, wake up, 8 o'clock in the morning. Weekend wake up for Premier League, 7 a.m. Like, people are getting up earlier to watch football at the weekend. But there's truth in that. The fact that it kind of crept in, didn't have to compete in prime time while delivering the best, the biggest, which Americans love. They love the biggest and the best. And it's that accessibility and the intelligent accessibility that NBC created with Rebecca Lowe that really did change everything.
I want to touch a little bit more on fandom before coming back to a little bit the initiative with the live streaming side of things. But just let's keep on that thread around football in the US. Just where do you see it today? Particularly what we followed especially is that big moment where MLS decided to go all in with Apple from a broadcasting perspective. Seemed to be quite a huge strategic decision, a financial decision, I should say, to really back the MLS, but has definitely, from everywhere I can see, hasn't worked out the way that I think anyone really wanted it to, with them obviously exiting that relationship. Do you think, how do you see that, both the Premier League situation comparatively with the MLS and what MLS is trying to do now to, I guess, raise its profile again?
Look, football in America means many, many things, and that's its complexity. When it comes third in the Economist study, the NFL is the NFL. We know what that is. The NBA is the NBA. Football is Liga MX. It's National Women's Soccer League. It's definitely Premier League. Oh my Lord, it's like a big, massive driver. It's Champions League. It's US Women's National Team. MLS is in there. If it was a band that we're talking about, Premier League is the lead singer. My God, it's a beautiful looking lead singer as well. MLS is probably the bass player. The Grateful Dead used to let their bass player sing a song, sing "Friend of the Devil" every kind of concert or two. So it plays an important role. Still hyper local. It's come so far so fast in my lifetime. It's just over 30. It's spotted head starts to the biggest leagues, the biggest tournaments, the biggest clubs in the world. And there's some delirious communities here, Nick. Incredibly distinctive, incredibly meaningful to the fan bases and singular. It's impossible to look at what LAFC have built. This incredible Hispanic fan base. We just did a live show with them, and it was beautiful, and it was meaningful, and it was real. I watch it on the television. I want to leap through the screen. There's several of these fan bases. The National Women's Soccer League too, the same. But the Premier League is the juggernaut. The Champions League is the juggernaut. A couple of years ago, Alexander Shefferin asked to come on the show, and we did an interview. And in the middle of it, he said what I think he came on to say, which is to trial balloon the notion of a Champions League final being played in New York City, which was quickly walked back, creating an outcry across Europe, as it should have done. But you kind of realize this is the moment. America, the audience is so deep. The audience is so, it's the target audience for so many teams across the world, so many leagues. The Spanish league is desperate to play a live league game that counts in the United States. So is Serie A. The Champions League, they're salivating at this opportunity. There's so many footballers we interviewed during the World Cup were like, oh my God, playing at SoFi, playing at Dallas Stadium, AT&T. My God, these temples of sport. The footballers want to play here too. It's like a dam. Once one game is played here, that's the biggest challenge for MLS. Once one game is played here, every league will flood over. It's almost like that everyone is held in check right now. But once it breaks, that's the reality. The ecosystem will become like an invasive species. Will just eat it up. But MLS plays a role here. It's an important role. It's a meaningful role. But there's no doubt the Premier League, as it is in Germany increasingly, as it is across Europe, the Premier League is king. Americans love the best. They love the dream team. They don't love a dream on team. They don't have that patience. And so it is the joy of my life. When I fly home now on a weekend to film in the United Kingdom, it's like a party bus. We do a study of our fan base every year. 27% of our listeners fly over to watch their teams in England at least once a year.
Wow.
And so that connection is deep, meaningful, different than the fandom in the United Kingdom in ways we've studied. It's incredibly fascinating to think about and talk about. But the Premier League is just utterly dominant.
What are some of those things that stand out on the differences between those two fan sets?
Look, I did a live show with Everton Football Club on Monday night at the Hill Dickinson with the club and a ton of the players. It's the first time we've done a show in England. It's actually the first time my lovely mum was able to come and see us, which is really meaningful. And I started off talking about my Everton fandom, what it means to me as my identity, a set of values. It means to all of us, I think, who live and die, a lot of dying with Everton Football Club. Loyalty, tenacity, commitment, connectivity, a real sense of laughter in the face of doom, all these qualities that I think are really good for life. I talked about how my third generation, my grandfather was a Blue, both of my parents are Blues, all of my kids are Blues, probably the best and worst parenting contribution I've made. That's the flow. That's the English thing. I'm from Liverpool, Blues, passing it on through the generations, almost biblically. The vast majority of American fans are choosing shorn of geographic connectivity. They're not from any of these cities, and they don't have it, handed down. It's not in their blood. It's not something they inherit. So they're choosing shorn of any emotional connect, which means it's completely, a free choice. It's often incredibly random. And what's amazing is how deep it becomes. Jay Watt, the NFL legend, is a regular on our show. He first came on stuffed in a Chelsea shirt, did the bits that we have a lot of, John Oliver, John Stewart.
Yeah, super high profile personalities. So I was looking at that earlier, and there's a who's who on that list of guests you've had over the last few weeks.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing. Rob and Ryan came on. Rob Mack, Ryan Reynolds came on this week. Wemby, Victor Wembanyama. The final week of the World Cup was pretty magical in that regard. We're very, we have deep ties, and JJ Watt came on, stuffed in his Chelsea shirt, did the bits that most NFL or NBA stars do about, making noises about their interest in football. Great. And then 2 months later, his rep asked if he could come on again. I was like, I've kind of done what I can do. He did these bits. I'm not sure there's a lot more, left to squeeze there. Like, no, trust me, he's really into it now. I was like, great, okay, all right. So he came back on. Man knew everything. I mean, he had fallen down a YouTube wormhole and had my God, it was like levels. And then a couple of weeks later, he texted me. He goes, I'm going to invest in Burnley. And before I could say don't do it, he's there on the plane over there. And that arc from curiosity, we always talk about soccer curious, football curious, I'm interested, to going in deep. That's the arc that's happened for so many. And it is random, the first connection. I was with someone last year who had a Tottenham Hotspur tattoo on their forearm. I was like, well, why have you got that, man? And he goes, oh, my last name is Thompson. When I was digging around, I saw that Tottenham used to be sponsored. My American accent is terrible still, I'm sorry. I saw that Tottenham were once sponsored by Thompson Holidays, so I'm all in. I was like, holy crap, man. From a random reason, you now have a Tottenham tattoo on your forearm. And I love it. So that it goes from nothing to everything. That's the driver. And then there are substantial differences that, part of our mission is to help teams understand it. Americans in their sports, you're from Chicago, you support the Chicago Bears, Chicago White Sox, it's multi-team fandom here, and it's come over to football. So I always ask our fans when I'm in the street and someone stops me, I always say, hey man, who's your team? And people will go, and this is very odd for English ears, I know, so just putting a health warning. The fans will say, I'm an Arsenal fan. Wrexham are my lower league team. Dortmund are my German team, and I really, really love Elche. And I'll be like, wow, okay, and my women's team is North Carolina Courage. And the bandwidth they have for support, and from that muscle that they've developed in American sport carrying it over, it means that teams like Atletico Madrid, they can aim for that, that to be the Spanish team here. It's quite fascinating. They have three young, coveted Americans. Like, oh, that's interesting. They could become very, very easy. They have a real opportunity as Americans become more nuanced, and so on and so on and so on. When you watch Wrexham play in the United States, play a Premier League team, and yes, Liverpool at Yankee Stadium. Liverpool are one of the most, Arsenal and Liverpool, authentic, historic, yearning, the two biggest teams in the United States. But my God, Wrexham punch so way above their weight. The number of Wrexham jerseys, the number of Wrexham fans, and so there really is an opportunity for everybody.
I recently did a podcast or a chat with Sean Harvey, who's a director at the Wrexham Football Club as well, and great guy. And he was saying, I think that the study they did at the end of last year was something like that Wrexham's followed by an average of 7 times the amount of fans an average Premier League club is followed by in the US. So yeah, they've got a pretty good stranglehold in that marketplace. I want to keep moving on to things, specifically back to the MLS situation, the opportunity. Obviously, the World Cup's just been, that's been one of the driving forces of of interest around the sport of late. What's your view on just how that Apple MLS dynamic has worked? From my point of view, it's been interesting to see that quite a unique approach, putting all your eggs into one platform's basket. How's that been received, and how do you think it's performed given what we've seen since the launch of it?
You speak to smarter human beings than me. My focus really is almost unrelentingly on the Premier League and the Champions League. I cover the US men who are in a very interesting moment in that they too, as Americans, seek the best and move to, really do feel like they're Arsenal fans, really do. Or feel so deeply connected to Liverpool. The default position of just being an automatic US fan has been kind of buried alive. I think MLS is a choice. It's not an automatic choice. I remember early on going into ESPN, having an argument with an executive. The executive was like, "Who do you think a kid in Houston is going to support? Is he going to support Real Madrid, a team far away in a foreign language? Or is he going to support the Houston Dynamo, who are right here in their own backyard, where they can buy the shirt of the town and they can see their team with their own eyes in their own stadium, in prime time?" Again, my American accent's terrible. I apologize.
But it's better than mine. It's better than mine.
I remember looking at him. I've been here years and all that. I can say like, "Hooray for Hollywood." I said to him, "God, Real Madrid every day of the week." I mean, every day of the week. And I think I wasn't kicked out of that person's office, but my Lord, the argument was heated. But it's ridiculous to think any other way. And the challenge for MLS that they've been struggling with is to put it behind the paywall, is to create a friction. And football finds you easily. And so to hide it can be death. Especially for this new fan base after the World Cup, we felt it. The audience was enormous before the World Cup, but there's an even bigger. It's like the football fan base in the United States is like a river that's burst its banks right now, and you find your thing immediately. You don't want to have to look for it. You don't want to create a struggle. You don't want to create a friction. And then also the natural inclination of an American is to love the best, and so I understand, having seen the rise of English football, that what is not always what will be. I can remember, and this is a name that will only mean something to your older viewers, that when the Premier League started, English football was still a muddy backwater. Italian football, Jurgen Clinton always says, Italian football was where the music was played. It was. I remember when Ravanelli moved to Middlesbrough. We're getting more mentions in this show probably than any other episode you've done. The Italian newspapers wrote, 1992, 1993, wrote how sad it is that his career has imploded to such a degree that he has to go to England. That's the only possibility, and that's where MLS is right now. They've made a bet on these names, older names. Lewandowski, the latest to come. Offer step, still massive global names. That's a move. What English football then did is bring that next wave of young talent, move the quality of football up. And the tectonic plates under football, they're always shifting. They're always changing. Again, the order, the hierarchy, the food chain, it's deeply malleable. And there's so much money here and there is so much interest. You can see a future scenario where the game grows and grows and grows, and the quality, ultimately we're only just cheering for spreadsheets. The quality, the budget, the wages goes up. But you can also see a future where that dam bursts, where that Champions League final is played at MetLife, where the Serie A are coming over, where La Liga is suddenly playing. By the way, this is not the future. I think is great. I understand how complicated this is, and I know how emotionally devastating it is for Premier League fans to think of a future in which their teams are playing games in the United States. We are moved in, and I said this before the World Cup, and you're living it out with FIFA right now. I think football has entered its American century. The players are not where we want them to be on the men's side, but the owners, the equity investors, they have flooded over, and they were welcomed with open arms in leagues up and across Europe. They're now shaping the future of football, for good or for bad. I keep saying this, it is for good or for bad. I want to be clear to your listeners. I love America. I love the rise of football here. It's been the story of my life. I am not cheerleading that the world now buckle to American interests, American tastes, American cultural realities. But that is the future. The next kind of 50 years of football is that battle between the local and the global. Between the local, the global, and the American, really. I think it's now a three-way, nuanced, complex reality, and this is where we are.
So following from the MLS example of them going behind a paywall, I mean, one of the things I'm bringing it back to the streaming side of things that you guys looked at and did this past week was democratizing access to the content more through your own respective channels. Just talk us through what it was like live streaming the Spurs-Hoffenheim match on the platform, the first time you guys have lent into that type of live streaming experience, from what I understand. How was it, and did it perform relative to your expectations?
It actually surpassed the expectations in a remarkable way. Look, Nick, we built a business by being in this fast-growing sport and watching the rights holders do battle in the United States, and doing the parts that the rights holders don't want to do or can't do in the most intelligent, creative, and I hope meaningful way. Well, I know meaningful way for the audience. So that's where we exist. Our audience are deeply, deeply engaged. Like, we really have gone after super serving the fan base, really owning in a nourishing way. That's the other part of the story, ultimately, that we don't have time to talk about. But I do believe the world is dark. It's full of challenge. And the act of watching football can be just incredibly joyous. The sense of global connectivity, the sense of wonder, the sense of feeling alive. Even as an Everton fan, you feel that fleetingly. These are all really, really important things, the feeling of emotion. So we do try and provide like an upbeat, joyous, I think meaningful, human content to a very young audience. So if you do watch the Mikel Arteta interview, if you watch Eberechi Eze, who comes on a lot, Jurgen Klopp, Pep used to come on a ton. And we're trying to, ultimately, I want to try and shoot interviews. These are human beings who are experiencing things that no one else is experiencing in the crucible of pressure, the like of which we can't imagine. A film with Andoni Iraola, who's come on a lot and now obviously is even more fascinating as he grapples with the Liverpool project. To spend time with him, I can ask him, is Curtis Jones going? Who's going to replace Mo Salah? But I'm more fascinated by how he handles the act of leadership, the act of transformation, how he's going to handle the cop, which sets the emotional tenor for the entire club. He's a stoic man, a quiet man. He's not like Jurgen Klopp himself as the conductor between fans and players. These are the kind of human questions that really engage our audience and motivate our audience. So I'm very focused on the non-rights holding aspect. It's what's built our business, that and live activations, bringing fans physically together at scale, which we're doing increasingly more in the United States with some really in 2027, some massive, massive opportunities and massive new partnerships. But Tottenham came to us. The Premier League teams want to own and speak to this fan base in new and really quite thoughtful ways. And they created this opportunity. And so we went also to cover it on the ground, to be there, to speak to the American audience from their stadium, which is probably the most NFL equivalent stadium in England. And it's the number, we had 10,000 concurrents for a live preseason game in the United States for Tottenham Hotspur against Hoffenheim. We thought we get it. I think we thought we get about between 2,800 and 3,200 concurrents. When you think of the fan base, you think of the preseason nature, you think of the opponent, all of these things factored in. It was a beautiful experience. It was a fascinating experience with the data and the back end and what we learned, the impressions and the engagement that we got through the thing from being on the ground was enormous as a storytelling moment. I think for us, it was a very, all I'll say for right now is because it was a week ago and we're still working in the way with Tottenham too to try and understand the enormity of the opportunity. And I just say it will not be the only time that we'll do this as a result.
In terms of the coverage, you said you were on the ground producing content in and around the match. Did you add anything to the actual live broadcast yourself, or was it mainly all the build-up related content you added to it?
Yeah, I mean, we do a lot of live streaming. We do second screen. So when the US play, we have a partnership with TNT, HBO, and they'll give us a channel in their empire. So the game will be broadcast. We'll broadcast like the Manning cast with Clint Dempsey and a ton of celebrity talent that loves to come on. So like, when the US played England in the 2022 World Cup, we watched the game live with Matthew McConaughey. And I just say to your earlier point, I cheered for the United States even louder than McConaughey, but that was probably just a Liverpool boy in me rather than anything. But ultimately for this, we did a number of interviews with Tottenham that we cut into the pre-game and the halftime, and to sit down with Roberto De Zerbi, for instance, and really listen to that man, which is like putting your hands on the truck and just trying to hold on, just his intensity, his focus, his everything, a human being. So that's what we cut into that. If we were going to do it again, I think we'd probably do second screen also, live from the stadium, to be honest, and cut a bunch of the players in. But the game, we wanted to let it speak for itself. And see how that occurred. So I'd say this was a first, and the next time we'll build and build and build and build. But again, all of this, I want to be clear, none of it do we take for granted. It's just, to do the match day lives, the college game days before World Cup games, city to city to city, to Premier League teams that I supported as a kid. And to sit on stage with their players on the eve of a new season. And none of it do we take for granted. To spend the day at Arsenal filming with Mikel, Bruno Guimaraes, with Eberechi Eze and more. I said to you before we came on, there's 330 million people in America. And for our platform, for our network to have built the platform, the community, the fan base that has created this opportunity. I think none of us who are over here, we got a large team on the ground in England at all times. We brought a huge team over from England to support this week. The league is back week across England. I think none of us take it for granted.
Well, definitely, I think anyone who works in the sports industry shouldn't take that for granted, and especially all the great content, great opportunities you're creating for people to connect with some real incredible personalities and voices across the football landscape. It is really a credit to you, Roger, for what you've built and what you're continuing to deliver day in, day out. I have a bunch of other questions, but I'm conscious you've got to get on a plane. You've been frantically working these last few days. So I think it's probably a good spot to wrap up on. But I will ask you, I will put you on the spot and ask, who do you think is going to win the Premier League this season?
It's the greatest moment. We're here, what is it, Thursday? I don't even know what day it is anymore, Nick. It's beautiful. The day before, where's the day before the Premier League kicks off? 380 games lie ahead of us like fresh snow. And the ridiculous part today is every fan of every team can make themselves believe, can make the case. So it's ecstatic. So I'm legally bound to say Everton Football Club. But I spent the day, I've spent the day at Chelsea. I spent the day at Liverpool yesterday. I spent the day at United. Being at Arsenal was really, really fascinating. I've never been at a club, a team of any sport, where the moment you win for the first time, you are comfortable, confident, just enough to use the D word for dynasty, as they say in America. And when Mikel Arteta said it to me, I almost fell off my chair. I think I asked him to repeat it, which he did many, many times. And there is a confidence, there is a belief, there's a stability in this Premier League of chaos. None of us know what's going to happen. Some of these teams are going to click. That's what we do know. It's almost like a World Cup rather than a Premier League, where the teams are finding themselves or find themselves in play. Through play, some of these cultures will congeal and become deeply, deeply focused and a clenched fist. Xabi at Chelsea, fascinating to watch his redemption tour. Andoni Iraola at Liverpool. Ente Maresca and Manchester City, that's an incredibly nuanced, complicated job. So I think the stability, the depth. I sat down with Bruno Guimaraes, his hunger. Oh my God, his hunger. his hunger mostly to tattoo new trophies on his body, is what he told me.
I did ever listen to your podcast earlier with Rory and picked up on that.
It's crazy.
That
I don't know.
soundbite.
By the way, I said to him, "Where are you going to tattoo them, man? Well, what space do you have on your body?" And he goes, "There's room. There is room." So Arsenal Football Club, and then we're guessing the joy of football. Nick, I say this is that it always makes a fool out of all of us. It teaches us ultimately that none of us know anything. So I'm kind of picking when I say Chelsea second, just guessing. It's like we don't have the inputs, the necessary inputs. So I'll just say Everton.
Well, look, there's clearly so many storylines that always play out across the industry, whether it's on the business side or from the fan side. And no doubt this season will be just like as good as any other in terms of all those stories that you've just sort of alluded to already. But Roger Bennett, thank you so much for joining us today. For those that are listening in, make sure you do, if you haven't already, sign up and subscribe to the various Men in Blazer channels and content. They are a cut above. And look, Roger, look forward to seeing what's next from you guys.
Oh, it's the Women's World Cup, full steam ahead. Nick, I've enjoyed this greatly. Thank you so much, man. Courage.